Hello and welcome back to another episode of What If on HITC Football, where we look at how the footballing world could have changed if some key moments had gone differently. We've previously looked at the most famous slip in Premier League history as we asked, what if Steven Gerrard never slipped against Chelsea? And today we're going to have a look at another famous instance of lost footing as we ask, what would have happened if John Terry didn't slip in the 2008 Champions League final? It's crazy to think that this was 14 years ago, and many of you may not remember this moment. In the 2008 Champions League final, Chelsea faced Manchester United in Moscow, and this was one of the most tightly contested finals you're likely to ever see. Cristiano Ronaldo and Didier Drogba both netted in a 1-1 draw that eventually went to penalties, and a miss from Ronaldo gave Chelsea the advantage. Chelsea dispatched their first 4 penalties perfectly, and they needed to score their 5th in order to win. And up stepped Captain Fantastic, John Terry. Terry pulled up his captain's armband as he prepared himself for the biggest moment of his career, but in the Russian rain, the Blues skipper slipped and cost his team the Champions League. Nicolas Anelka would eventually miss in sudden death, handing United their 3rd European crown and leaving John Terry in tears. It couldn't have happened to a nicer bloke in our opinion. But what if Terry had scored from the spot? Chelsea would have been crowned as the European champions for the first time in 2008, and that would have had a few huge knock-on effects throughout European football. So let's start by taking a look at Chelsea themselves. The 2008 Champions League final was Avram Grant's final game as Chelsea manager, with the Israeli being unceremoniously sacked after the final defeat. However, much like Roberto Di Matteo 4 years later, we can't see how Roman Abramovich would have sacked Grant if he'd brought the club their first Champions League title. So in this reality, Grant stays on as Chelsea boss, but again, just like Di Matteo, we don't think he'd be in a job for too long beyond that point. Indeed, given the fact that Abramovich clearly wasn't a fan of Grant as a head coach, and that his record post-2008 with both Portsmouth and West Ham was abysmal, we think that Grant would be gone by Christmas. So if Grant is sacked in late 2008, where did Chelsea turn to? Well, in real life, they went out and got Big Phil Scolari, but sadly, he didn't last too long. However, we think things could have gone differently for the Brazilian in this reality. But for now, let's take a little detour over to Manchester. Of course, if United don't win the 2008 Champions League final, plenty would have changed at Old Trafford, and perhaps the biggest change would be regarding a certain Cristiano Ronaldo. Ronaldo was undoubtedly one of the best players in the world at that point, and Real Madrid were desperate to sign him. But after United won European football's biggest prize, the attacker committed to one more year in red. However, if United don't win the Champions League in 08, we have to feel that Ronaldo would be departing a year early, and that would have had a huge knock-on effect within the Premier League. In the 08-09 season, United were crowned champions, with 18 goals from Ronaldo firing them to the title. But with CR7 over in Madrid a year earlier, we have to predict a slight drop-off from Alex Ferguson's side. It was Liverpool who finished that season in 2nd place on 86 points, just behind United, spearheaded by Fernando Torres and Steven Gerrard. And with Ronaldo out of the picture, we think that the Reds would have pipped United to the post and won their first Premier League title in 2009. Liverpool winning the title in this reality would potentially change the timeline on the departures of Xabi Alonso and Fernando Torres, which, in turn, could have led to Rafa Benitez keeping his job at Anfield well into the 2010s. Manchester United would also reach the Champions League final in 2009, but without Ronaldo in their team, we can't see that happening either. So defeated semi-finalist Arsenal, they take their place in the final in Rome, but it's not going to be Barcelona that they face. If Scolari was appointed at Chelsea at a later date, we think that the Blues would have reached the Champions League final in 2009. Let's not forget, they came within a whisker of beating Barcelona in the semis, crashing out due to poor refereeing and a ridiculous last-minute winner from Andreas Iniesta. And while Scolari's football wasn't the most inspiring at Chelsea in the Premier League, the Brazilian has always been a fantastic tournament manager. Scolari has won the South American and Asian equivalents of the Champions League on 3 separate occasions, while he's also a World Cup winning manager with Brazil. So say what you will about his time at Chelsea, he knows how to get his teams over the line in these big games, and that infamous Barca match could have gone in a different direction if Scolari was in the dugout. Therefore, in 2009, it's a Chelsea versus Arsenal Champions League final in Rome, and we're backing Chelsea to come away with the win here. After all, they did beat Arsenal 4-1 that May, and off the back of their 2008 win, they would have already had experience of winning Europe's biggest prize. Unfortunately for Chelsea though, as we say, Scolari didn't have the best of records in the Premier League, so the following year's title heads to Old Trafford rather than Stamford Bridge, with Scolari at the helm rather than Carlo Ancelotti. So if Ancelotti isn't headed to Chelsea, what becomes of the Italian? Well, the Manchester City job was about to become available that December, and with the citizens ready to establish themselves as one of Europe's top clubs, we have to think they'd have made an approach for Ancelotti at that point rather than Roberto Mancini. We don't think the City's timeline would change all that much with Ancelotti at the helm instead of Mancini. After all, they're both incredibly talented managers geared for success, but we do think that Ancelotti would have had a slightly better initial run. In that 09-10 season, City would finish just behind Tottenham in the race for the top four, but with Ancelotti in the dugout, we feel that the Sky Blues would have beaten Spurs to a top four finish that year. City getting a Champions League spot that season over Spurs does lead to one final butterfly effect, and it regards Gareth Bale. Bale, of course, had his breakout performance in that season's Champions League against Inter Milan, but if Spurs don't qualify for that competition, he never puts on that display, and perhaps his permanent move away from left-back is delayed, potentially scuppering his eventual move to Real Madrid and affecting their recent Champions League success. Now, we're not saying that Ancelotti going to City would lead to Bale being a flop and Madrid never winning anything, but it would surely have had a bit of a knock-on effect on the timings of that transfer and how successful Madrid would be over that period. So there you have it. If John Terry doesn't slip in Moscow, Avram Grant is kept on at Chelsea and eventually replaced by Felipe Scolari at a later date. With Scolari starting later, he gets the chance to have a full Champions League campaign under his belt, and the tournament master leads Chelsea to a second consecutive European Cup win against Arsenal, who overcome a Ronaldo-less Manchester United, who lose the 2009 Premier League title to Liverpool. However, United do eventually get their comeuppance, winning the Premier League ahead of Chelsea next year, who falter in the league under Scolari, rather than appointing Ancelotti at that point, with the Italian heading to Manchester City instead of Roberto Mancini, eventually costing Spurs a place in the top four, halting Gareth Bale from putting on his breakthrough display against Inter in the Champions League the following season, perhaps affecting his eventual transfer to Real Madrid. But what do you think? What else would have happened if Terry had scored his penalty? Let us know your theories in the comments below, tell us which what if you want us to take a look at next, like and subscribe for more football content, and I'll be seeing you next time.